Do you feel you were born for more? Get ready to uncover your God-given purpose so you can impact the world with your gifts, your talents, and your story.
Welcome to the Purpose Power Summit. I'm your host, Mimika Cooney. Today, we have a very exciting concept that I'm sure many of you have probably thought about. It's the concept of embracing your gifts to really excel you into your purpose and your future. Social media strategist, speaker, and author of The Golden Rules of Social Media Marketing, Heather Heuman, has 20 years of combined experience in sales, social media, and business consulting. Identified in 2019 as a top business influencer, Heather is the founder of Social Thrive Business Academy. She's an international keynote speaker and the podcast host of Business, Jesus, and Sweet Tea. So welcome, Heather. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Mimika. I'm very excited to be here talking with you.
And this is one of my favorite things to always talk about. And with somebody like you, because you and I have come from a business and marketing background, and we always love to empower people, especially on the concept of purpose, like where are you going? How can we get you there? So that sort of business and strategy planning is definitely going to come out today. But what I love about you is you are a strong Christian with faith who works in business, but you also work from home. And, you know, I think if I remember hearing correctly, do you homeschool your kids too?
Well, we did homeschool for the last 2 years, but last August we did enroll them into private Christian school, but currently they're home.
We're back. So that's the thing is, you know, we have learned to adapt and just, you know, roll with what goes. And I think this is what's exciting. And what I really want to help our listeners get from today's conversation is that there's lots of opportunity. No matter what's happening in the world and no matter when you're listening to this, you don't have to be sucked in by the fear mongering and what was. I think is we need to know what has gone and we need to embrace something new. So Heather, you've got some great concepts I'd love for you to share with our audience today. Especially about you talking about excelling in your purpose. Now, let's go and dive into that a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think stories tell this really well. So I like to kind of embrace this idea of we are all different. And that can seem like such a cliche, but it's like at the end of the day, I think a little bit of my own story. Like my mom, she's that person who is so talented. She had an aunt when she was younger that taught her how to sew. And my mom was like making dresses at the age of like 8 and 9 years old. So it's like fast forward, my whole childhood was seeing my mom like making all these things, making aprons, making craft type of things, going to vendor affairs. Then when I was in 3rd grade, my mom said, you know, the guy who lived next door to us worked at an upholstery, an auto car place. So my mother like went and learned how to do like upholstery. And so she just started practicing on our furniture. And then she ultimately built her own upholstery business, not necessarily for cars, but for just furniture. And fast forward, it's like she made my wedding dress. She made all the bridesmaids dresses. Like my mom is that person that has like that skill and that gift. I have none of that. Like, I don't have any of that. I don't even necessarily have a desire for it. But it's like, I say that to say, if I were comparing myself to like my mom's journey and her skill set, it's possible to kind of feel like ill-equipped or I'm not good enough or I don't measure up, you know, and it's like my mom all the time when we're together now, she's like, my daughter is so smart. She does all these things. And she's almost like putting me up on this like separate thing of like, well, you do this and you do this and I'm not good at any of those things. So it's like what I think when we're having this conversation today, Mimika, I think that God wired us all differently. We all have such an interesting array of experiences and backgrounds and interests. So when we really allow for us to kind of make that heartfelt plea to God to say, you know, spark inside of me something that aligns with exactly how you wired me to be. And when we literally show up with intention in our lives, whether it's just as a mom or as a wife or as a CEO, we can be such a brighter light, I feel, because it doesn't just feel like it's this thing, right? It doesn't feel like I'm just trying to figure out like how to do something and check a box, it makes that when you wake up every day, you feel like you're actually pursuing a purpose. And that when we align that with who God made us to be, and we really try to allow those God given pieces of us to kind of guide that process, it, I feel, makes just life so much more meaningful as we are going just from every day to day.
Exactly. And, this is the thing is I love this idea of a reset, like no matter where you are in life and what's happening in the world. And we can always take an opportunity to just pause and think, okay, where am I going with this? Because like you're now a strategist, right? We work with clients and okay, where do you want to go? And we look at the steps of how to go there, kind of like an eagle eye vision of the whole picture, kind of where we're going and you're putting it through. But sometimes without that sort of stepping back process, it's very hard to push forward because if you're so close to, as you say, comparison or, worrying about fear or how to pay the bills, and you're kind of like you're operating in that fear zone, which doesn't make you really make smart decisions. So I love that concept of, understanding who you are, because, with the likes of social media, it's a very useful tool, but it can also be very, very disheartening for someone who's constantly seeing what someone else is posting and that whole comparison thing. So how do we find that part of understanding who we mean to be? Because what Susie Q does is good for her isn't necessarily good for me.
Yeah, well, something that I think is super tactical. Like I'm a strategy person, but I'm also very much like okay, let's not make this seem like it's all fancy. Let's break this down and here are the 8 things to actually implement this. And as I in hindsight think to you on that journey, just even for myself and kind of coming into what I realize today are what my God-given gifts are. From a work standpoint, I had about 6 years experience already, so to say, in digital marketing before I ever had kind of this like aha moment of this is like a gift I have. And it wasn't necessarily like my gift is digital marketing, but it was a couple years in when we lived in Germany, and one of my dear friends, Alyssa, she was like, Heather, she's like, do you realize that you are such a connector? She was like, you are always like, oh, wait, you like bananas? Like, you have got to go try this banana recipe. Or like, oh, wait, you are looking for something fun to do with your kids? Here, let me show you exactly how to go get to this new Mexican restaurant, like in downtown Wiesbaden. Here's like a step-by-step play on like how you can get there. And I mean, I think I was like 32 years old. And here I have like a peer, a dear friend of mine, just like speaking into me and articulating in words something I'd never personally said to myself. I had never woken up prior to that day and said, hey, Heather, you're actually really good at like bringing people together. You're really good at like making people that otherwise might feel like a wallflower or might feel like it's not cool if you're not the extrovert. You're really good about like going in, finding those people, connecting with them and like drawing them in and making them feel wanted and connected. And I had never put it really into words, even internally in my own head, until I just started having someone I love, someone I respected, just like speaking life into me. So I think something that we all can do is really just say, who are people that we might have currently in our inner circle that love us, that want nothing but the best from us? And maybe they see things in you and maybe they're articulating those to you. Maybe God's speaking through them. And are you and are we being good listeners to maybe those little seeds that God might be planting? Like that's just like a thought that's coming to me now as I'm talking with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it's totally true because it's kind of like, it's funny you said that. I had this conversation with my 21-year-old daughter the other day where, she's approaching her final year in college and having to pick subjects in what she's going to do. And, for the longest time, she always thought she had to hustle really hard. And if she wasn't working and striving and really, burning the midnight oil, she wasn't working hard enough. And there were some things that she does naturally that she's like, oh, that's easy. Everyone can do that. I'm like, no, not everybody can. And that's the thing is we often overlook things that we're naturally gifted at because they come easy or because they just come natural to us. Nobody has to ask us about that. Like I always say, if you had to stand up and talk for 5 minutes, okay, not to say if you love standing in front of people, but if you had to introduce something to somebody without being paid and you could just talk all day about it, what is that concept, whether it's homeschooling or starting a business or writing books or whatever that thing is? And like you said, it doesn't even have to be a skill set. It could be just a personality trait that becomes something that I think God plants in us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a natural tendency to gravitate towards things. And wouldn't you say, like, looking back at your past of kind of choices and maybe things that you've made are a good signpost to those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. Like, even just, as you just mentioned about your daughter, I think back to, I went into special education because I read one book by an author named Tori Hayden, and the book was called One Child. And it was basically this story about this teacher who like saw something in this kid and drew this child out of their shell and like made them be seen and be heard and feel special. And like, I read that book as a sophomore in high school, and I was like, I want to be a special education teacher. Now, I went on this journey and became a teacher. And shortly after, my life took a huge turn, and I ended up in this digital marketing space. So, but it's like, here I am now, 20 some odd years later, still connecting with people, still kind of doing a lot of those same things. And I do genuinely love teaching. I'm teaching social media at a local university, but it's like the ability to bring to life something that I am passionate about and making those connections with other people. It's sometimes, if we just compartmentalize our journey, it can feel so random and it can feel like very disconnected. But if I feel as believers, can just kind of stand back into what you and me, Mimika, can just seem like a muck of mess and, convoluted, messed up. Maybe we went down this path, but I feel like as believers that God has his hand on us and he hasn't left us or abandoned us. And I can now look back and go, this whole journey of like all the crazy, unique work experiences that I have had really all were like stepping stones for like the exact place and positioning for where I am now. And I don't mean that just as like a business person. I just mean like in my marriage and as a member of my church and as the mom I want to be, as I want to be able to spend time with my family. I just feel that when we lean into being okay with exactly how God wired us and really like embrace those gifts, that I feel that we can really have God-sized vision for like how he can use us for that.
Definitely. And I think that brings to mind, do not despise small beginnings. In the beginning, when you're a young 20-year-old, you get very impatient because you want things to happen now. But you realize, as you said, it's kind of like looking at the stepping stones, or I like to call it the breadcrumbs, that sort of light the way. And every little, side hustle or job you've had or interaction with the client or a conversation you've had, everything I think is intentional. And as, God says, he uses everything. Nothing is wasted, which is really amazing. Even some things about, having to work through a thought process when you've had to fight through something hard and you come out the other side with, strength and tools. I think it's really key. And I think it's good to know that this is a journey. We don't have to fight it. We don't have to arrive. Because wouldn't you say, especially like with the way the world is and you have so much access, it's like, we have an information overload. Now we know everybody's business. It's like really hard to kind of stay in our lane. So what advice would you give somebody who sort of maybe feels maybe a little lost or a little overwhelmed by all this? And how do we take one step in front of the other? What would your advice be?
Well, the first thing I would say is for anyone that if they feel like they're looking for what that might be and they're like on a searching process, like the Bible verse James 1:5 has been one that God has just been laying on my heart over and over probably like the last 6 months. And it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives it generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. And so I am encouraged by that to say, if you right now feel like you don't know what the next step is, to be like, great, no problem. Embrace James 1:5 that I just said and literally make that be your prayer, make that be your go-to. And like, ultimately, I think that when we just kind of like have opportunities built into our day to just slow, because I think that we live in a culture that we can compare ourselves like crazy to everyone else, whether it's what someone else fixed for dinner, whether it's what someone else's Easter family photo looked like, or what their matchy outfits look like, or even it's just like we look around and we're like, I want my marriage to be like what I just saw in that movie, and I want that, and I want that. And to actually, instead of just like comparing and having this hustle mindset, I feel that if we just literally focus, have time to be quiet, we're actually seeking God more than we're seeking the actual likes or shares on our social media, that it's going to allow a space for God to grab us and to get the attention that we want. And sometimes I think, Mimika, we want that direction, but we sometimes, maybe it's like this internal fight of like, wanting to be active or wanting to get results, that we may delay and not even just allow for some of that quiet time. So just to truly be intentional to allow that to be there.
Definitely. And it kind of reminds me of like, even the hard things like dealing with grief. Like I remember in 2016 was a really rough year for our family, where my mother-in-law had passed away from cancer. Within 3 months of dealing with a teenage child with, severe mental health issues, it pretty much grinds your life to a halt. So even though we have these plans and maybe we're like, oh, this 2020 is going to look like this, and I have all these things. God says, your man can make his plans, but God directs his steps. And sometimes it's just like a good parent. If we're going down the wrong route, we need to take a step back. But also, just like grief it's a process. And I think I'll admit I have been very impatient in my life, always wanting the next to arrive, and realizing God is like nature, right? We have this concept of planting and sowing, and then there's seed time, harvest. We don't see what's going on underground. The seed is germinating. It's in the dark. It's mucky. You think, what's going on? Nothing's happening. So I think that's a great concept, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So what would you say, like if you had to sort of wrap it up, if someone now saying, okay, I know God's got my attention. My whole day-to-day routine has been shifted. I now have the time, because God's always speaking, right? We're just not always listening. But now we have the time to listen. What would be a good actionable thing that you like to do when you're thinking of planning or strategy? If somebody's looking at their life now and walking out what God is showing them, what are some strategies you can give them?
I think sometimes that it's easy to maybe feel like you don't have the clarity that you're looking for. And so you just kind of get in this space of not doing anything and not just taking some type of initiative. So I would really share with people this idea of, I think imperfect action is okay. And that you will sometimes, things may not go perfectly, but I feel like whether, again, it's a personal goal, it's a business goal, it's wanting to start that next thing, it's wanting to pursue what you feel like God has put on your heart, to not feel that you have to have all of the pieces now for your puzzle for you to just get going. And you never know that you getting going and taking that next step might lead you to that next opportunity of that person that maybe God wants you to cross paths with that person, because maybe it's not a skill set that you have, but maybe that's someone that you might meet because you did take the initiative to just get going and to get started. It may be something that literally God's going to bless you with by bringing someone into your life that's got those other pieces. So I think it's just kind of like not getting in this, analysis paralysis place where the fear of the not doing it right prohibits you from doing anything at all.
I love that concept of imperfect action, right? Especially for us recovering perfectionists. We just don't want to make any decisions until it's done. Yes. Sometimes we just have to take the step, and then it starts to become more clear as we take this. And even, wouldn't you say, I find this in my life, finding out what I'm not good at or what I shouldn't be doing but through mistakes is actually a very good indicator too of knowing what not to do.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's like right? We can look back now 5 years ago with a thing that was just like heavy on our mind, and we're going to be like, oh yes, like, this is how God blessed me by that not working out. Or, wow, I was sitting here trying to pursue something and like, that's not what I'm really supposed to be pursuing. Thank you, God, for that not going together. Because I think sometimes, and I will confess, I don't think big enough. Like I have had prayer requests and I have had visions of like, God, this is what I'm looking for. I want to help 200 people grow in their business with social media. And it's like, what if God's like, really 200? Like, you know how many people there are on the earth? Like, I'm thinking bigger than you are. And so it's like at the end of the day, I feel like let's be good stewards of what God has gifted us and where we are now, so we can ultimately allow ourselves to grow as people or as leaders, so he can entrust in us that next thing and to really be able to dream really, really big.
I love that. You aren't dreaming big enough, right? Because God is, like when he gave Noah the blueprints for the ark, you can imagine if he's like, oh God, I can't do that. Are you serious?
Right.
That's like way too big. I'm not even going to try. He's like, no, I'm going to give you the blueprint. Don't worry. Little by little, you just got to swing the hammer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate these words of wisdom. And it's like so exciting to know that we have this opportunity that, no matter where we've been or where we thought we wanted to go, there's always an opportunity to try something. And I think God is doing something new. There's something new, and we just need to be open and willing to let go of the old and just embrace what he's taking us, where he's taking us. So share with everybody, how can they connect with you online and find all the things that you're doing?
Yeah. So the best place to find me would be to go to sweetteasocialmarketing.com. You will find links for all of my social. You can find out how you can join my free Facebook group if you're interested in growing and how to use social media for businesses or nonprofits. But personally, if you love hanging out on LinkedIn or Facebook, please come and find me there and just reach out and tell me that we got connected through Mimika. That would be awesome.
Perfect. And I'm so excited about that because you have a great collection of resources that I know you would definitely find useful. And also make sure to follow her on social media and see what she does, because I love your posts. So I'm going to say thanks again for being with me, Heather. It's always great to chat to you. And I'm going to say to everyone, if you've enjoyed what Heather had to say today, make sure to share it with your friends. I'm sure there's somebody who needs to hear what she had to say today. So make sure to go and do that. And if you want more free resources that are only available to those who are watching the summit, go to mimikacooney.com and click on the summit tab. It'll take you to where all the resources our speakers are offering, some great freebies, and where you can connect with them and some other great goodies. So we just hope to hear some great testimonies after this, and that all the encouragement everyone has received. So I got to say thank you again, Heather. And we'll connect again in the future. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Heather has been on my podcast, Mimika TV. So if you want to hear more of her story and some more great content she shares, make sure to go to mimikacooney.com and check that out. So thanks again, Heather. I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for watching. Take care.
Thank you.
If you want more free resources that we only share with our newsletter community, go to mimikacooney.com and sign up today. We have great resources like ebooks, inspirational screensavers, printables, and exclusive access to our community.